Hi, my name is Isaac Esplin, and this is for the online Understanding DNA class. For this video, what I'm going to do is show how to trace a genetic trait to see how that gene is passed on, and to also get a good understanding of what type of gene it is that's being passed on. For this video, we'll be talking about earlobes, and you'll be able to apply it to other traits besides earlobes, such as eye color, color blindness, the color of your hair, etc. And so not only will you be finding out about your family and your extended family, but you'll be finding out deeper things about their physical traits that they have. Here, with our example, what genetic trait we're going to be looking at are detached or attached earlobes. You may have heard this before. Detached earlobe, like it shows right here, it kind of dangles down a little bit, and attached earlobes, they go straight into the side of the cheek. And because they're really pretty easy to differentiate, this is an easy genetic trait to map out or to profile. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is show the symbols so that you can look at a pedigree and it'll make sense as we're making it. We're going to be involved with pretty much everything on the left hand side except for dizygotic or non-identical twins or unspecified sex, but everything else we'll be dealing with, as well as affected individuals. Right here we have the affected male and affected female. Right, so the first thing I did is I just looked at my family and discovered who had detached earlobes. So those who are affected are those who have detached earlobes, and unaffected have attached earlobes. So what I discovered, this here is me, and right now I'm engaged. So this line right here, when a square and a circle are linked together by a line, it means they're married, but I'm engaged and didn't know how to do that stuff with a dotted line. And my earlobes are attached, but what I discovered is 3 of the 6 boys that my parents had, this is my parents right here, my dad with detached earlobes and my mom with attached earlobes. 3 of the 6 boys had detached earlobes, and 2 of their daughters, out of 2 of their daughters, one, my sister Hannah, had detached earlobes, and my sister Heidi had attached earlobes. And as you can see this line goes down, and this goes down to all of their kids. And then my brother and my nephew, my brother had attached earlobes. My sister-in-law, Amber, she has detached earlobes, and their son, Benson, has detached earlobes as well. So that's how that's been passed on from my parents. My dad is the one with the detached, my mom is the one with the attached, and then both of their fathers actually had detached earlobes as well, which I thought was pretty interesting. Alright, now we have what I've done is I actually talked to my extended family and got in contact with as many of them as I could. Mostly on my mom's side, they were easier to get a hold of. And I found out who in their family had detached earlobes and who had attached earlobes. And a lot of these people had more kids, but they either weren't able to get the information or I wasn't able to get a hold of them. So this pedigree chart is incomplete, but it still has enough information that we can use it to get a good estimated guess of where this gene for detached earlobes is located. We can get a little closer to knowing where it's at. So as you can see, a couple of my mom's oldest sisters are twins, my Aunt Kayleen and my Aunt Karen. My Aunt Kayleen married my Uncle Marvin, who had detached earlobes. This is my Uncle Richard, who married my Aunt Peggy. And Uncle Richard had detached earlobes. This is my Aunt Debbie, and she married Chuck. and they had more kids, but this is the information I was able to get. Out of the 3 daughters, one of them had detached earlobes, and one of the sons had detached earlobes. They have another son and another daughter too, but I wasn't able to get that information. And then this is my Aunt Gay, who married John, and they had one daughter who had detached earlobes, and one of their 3 sons, and this is their whole family. So, but what I want you to notice here is notice that in order for this trait to be passed on, it looks like all of them had to have at least one parent that had the trait. See, here my grandfather on my mother's side had detached earlobes, and so his son did, and one of his daughters did, and then that gene trickled down to the next generation too. For me, I also had a father with detached earlobes, but I did not inherit that trait, but about half of my brothers and half of my sisters did, and that looks like it's going to continue down to the next generation. So now that we've filled out the pedigree chart as best as we can, I went and talked to my family, got as much information in as much generations as I could. Now we can use that information in that pedigree chart to see which kind of trait detached earlobes are, and we can use that to guess how that might be passed on in future generations. So we'll see whether it's Y-linked, X-linked, recessive, autosomal recessive, autosomal dominant, or X-linked dominant, based on these qualifications for the type of trait. If we look at this, we see that twice as many females are affected in an X-linked dominant trait. Doesn't skip generations. Generally, an affected female will pass the trait to half her children, and sons and daughters will be equally affected. All daughters of an affected male will be affected. There is no male-to-male transmission. So that doesn't really fit with ours, because remember, some of the females weren't affected, but because the dads were affected, they passed that on. And also, not all of the daughters of affected males were affected, so we know it's not X-linked dominant. Next we have autosomal dominant, where females and males are equally likely to have the trait. Traits do not skip generations. Affected children have at least one affected parent, and there is male-to-male transmission. Okay, so that one seems like it fits, because we know with our detached earlobes that every generation had at least one person who had detached earlobes, and it equally affected males and females. There was about half and half, roughly, that had detached earlobes. And like we talked about, each affected child had at least one affected parent, and there were fathers who passed it on to sons. Autosomal recessive, just looking at this picture we can tell that it's not, but we'll look at the key definition. Males and females are equally likely to have the traits. Okay, ours was. Traits often skip generations. That disqualifies our example, because it was in every generation. And then affected children are born to unaffected parents. Obviously, all of our affected children had at least one. So it's definitely not an autosomal recessive trait. X-linked recessive trait, like this is skipping a generation right here. It says the trait is far more common in males than in females. The trait skips one or more generations. Affected males are usually born to unaffected mothers. There is no male-to-male transmission. So really none of those fit our definition. And finally there's Y-linked, where only males are affected. All sons of an affected male are affected, and the trait does not skip generations. Remember, we had plenty of girls that had detached earlobes too. So based on that, we can infer that the trait in my family for detached earlobes is an autosomal dominant trait. Alright, so let's see how that applies to me. And we hadn't talked about this earlier, but my fiance actually has attached earlobes. So based on this, I can predict that it's most likely, because with an autosomal dominant trait, you're equally as likely to inherit it or not to inherit it. That means that my children have an equally likely chance of having detached or attached earlobes. So what I can almost count on is that half of my sons and half of my daughters will have detached earlobes if the statistics work out. Obviously it doesn't work out that perfect all the time, but that's just to demonstrate how this can apply to you, and why it's important that we can figure out a pedigree like this and figure out what type of trait it is. And you can do this with Y-linked, with X-linked, with autosomal recessive. If you'll just pick out a trait that's easy to pick out and you know someone in your family has, and then trace it like I did with this pedigree chart, you can figure out which type of trait it is, and then use that to determine the likelihood of your children inheriting that trait based on whether your spouse has that trait as well. So yeah, that's about it. But it's been awesome. This has been a fun project. I've got to learn a lot and teach a lot of my family members about it too, while I've been asking him about this trait and telling him what I'm doing. But yeah, take this and it can be a fun thing to do, to figure out how traits are passed on. Thank you.